Alright, hello everybody. Today we are going to, that's what I was going to do before I started this review, but oh well, it doesn't matter now. Today we are going to be reviewing a movie that came out actually around the holiday season last year, I do believe, and now it seems to be out again this year around the holiday season on Netflix, or it's been on the entire time and it's just like really repopularized, repopularized around this time of year. Uh, Mainly probably because it came out last year and now that Black Adam's out, it's kind of boosted again on Netflix, right? And it was the number one most watched movie, I think, in Netflix history, I do believe, if I'm remembering correctly. It was highly watched anyway, I do know that much. This movie is called Red Notice, which was extremely good, like one of probably my favorite movies of all times, and I will say for sure that I think I've watched it about 4 times now, because I think I watched it 3 times last year and then once this year so far. So I might sneak it in a couple more times just to see it again and again and again, because it's just a really phenomenal movie. I mean, with a really good cast. So Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, Gal Gadot, or yeah, Gal Gadot, and then Rita Ora, and that's pretty much literally pretty much the main cast of the movie. Um, so Ryan Reynolds' character, Nolan Booth, is the number one art thief in the world, or at least he's somewhat the number one art thief in the world because he has have some competition from this character called the Bishop, and they are trying to steal Cleopatra's 3 eggs to give to this guy known as uh, who were they trying to give it to some sort of king, if I'm remembering. Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, the king and his family are huge art fans and obviously um, huge fans of history. I guess if they're after Cleopatra's eggs, right? So the people know where the first and the second egg is, but the location of the third egg has been a mystery for years, like decades, centuries, sort of thing. Nobody could ever find it. But Nolan somehow knows the location of the third egg, which is actually quite interesting. Uh, and he knows, obviously, the background story to it, as we find out later on in the film. So, um, Dwayne Johnson's character, John Hartley, is a cop. Um, I believe, yeah. Uh, no, he's not a cop. He was a detective. What was the detective? What was his title? Good Lord. Oh, an Interpol agent. He was an Interpol agent, but he had another title. I can't remember exactly what it was now. But anyway, him and Nolan end up working together. So Hartley and Nolan end up working together. And then at the very beginning of the movie, um, he does try to catch him, but to no avail. And then he ends up having to go to Bali, which is out of his jurisdiction, but not out of Agent Inspector Doss's jurisdiction. And I guess Nolan Booth already knows who uh, Inspector Doss is, so he has a pretty high amount of respect for her. And he ends up going to this prison in Russia, where it turns out Agent Hartley also ends up going to as well. Yeah, so where Hartley ends up going to as well, and they end up being cellmates because I guess Doss has a very sort of sick sense of humor, and when they get there, the bishop is already one step ahead. She was the one that called the cops on Agent Hartley, and she was the one that deposited the money into his account, and obviously she was the one that stole the egg out of the first egg out of the truck, right? Or we do find that out later. because Agent Doss comes up to Hartley and smashes the egg, and when at the very beginning he pours the Coke on it to show that it's a fake, when obviously we know that Nolan Booth has to be in the room somewhere, and there's this huge chase scene, and yeah, just there was lots of action in this movie as well for this type of a movie. That's for sure, and comedy. Yeah, there were some pretty funny lines delivered from Ryan Reynolds, as there usually is in a Ryan Reynolds movie. Anyway, but what was I saying there? So yeah, we find out that she was the one that stole the egg, the first egg from the truck when they're trying to transport it, and obviously when they're trying to transport Nolan Booth to the prison. So they end up in Russia, in a Russian prison together, and they obviously have to escape because now the bishop is after the second egg. So now they have to go to now they have to go to Sotto Voce's place to beat the bishop to the second egg. And there are little subtle hints now that I've watched the film again, as to two of certain people working together, although you don't pick up on it the first time you watch it, so it's kind of like it is a shock value at the very end, or at least I didn't see it coming, that's for sure. So yeah, obviously, Agent Hartley, or Hartley is more worried about catching the bishop, right, and Booth is more worried about the egg. And then we find out that the bishop is, of course, once again, one step ahead. She's tipped off Agent Doss. Yeah, she's tipped off Inspector Doss to come to this party that they're all going to be at. Then it turns out that she's actually working with Sotto Voce. So they're trying to get the information out of Booth and Hartley as to where the egg is. Eventually, he gives up a fake location in Egypt, and he thinks that he sent the bishop and Sotto Voce off on that path. Turns out the bishop was actually double-crossing Sotto Voce as well, so she ends up just going off on her own, and then Booth tells Hartley that he obviously lied to the bishop, so now he's telling him where the real location of the third egg is, somewhere in Argentina. So they have to go over to Argentina and find this old Nazi bunker. So I guess one of Hitler's men, who was also, I guess, an art collector, took one of the three eggs when I think it must have been during World War II, I do believe, when the Nazis were almost being defeated, and he fled with just packed really light, fled with just a suitcase and a few belongings, and traveled on boat over to Argentina, where there was a secret Nazi bunker, and that's where they apparently hid the third egg. So they're kind of just walking through the jungle at this point, and Hartley's getting extremely upset with Booth, obviously. And at this point, he just wants to get the third egg so he can clear his name, or at least that's what he's leading Booth on to believe. And yeah, they do end up finding the third egg, but then all of a sudden, Agent Doss shows up, and obviously the bishop shows up because she goes, "Did you really think that I was going to actually fall for your tricks and just go to these pyramids all by myself?" So she had followed them, I guess. Where had she followed them from? I guess she waited for them to escape from Sotto Voce because she figured that they would, and I guess she followed them out of there and to Argentina, right? That was it. So yeah, there was a lot of locations in this one. So Bali, I think, was it, where was the first location? Was it Paris where the egg was being held first? The first egg was being held, and then obviously his like hideaway house was in Bali, and then I can't remember where Sotto Voce was, where Sotto Voce's place was, but it was somewhere else too. I'm trying to remember all the locations they traveled to, so I'm pretty sure Paris, Bali, obviously Argentina. Where was it? Because they weren't in Egypt. There was some other place. Oh my God! If I can remember the name of it, I will. But anyhow, So now that they're in Argentina, yeah, Doss shows up, and then there's a huge big gunfight and a car chase, which was really cool. And they do end up getting the egg, and the bishop just flies them right out of the cave into the water. And obviously, Agent Doss isn't going to follow them down there. Uh, and then you kind of see a little bit of character development from Booth. He kind of goes back into the water to find Hartley, and Hartley's already on shore. And I was like, that's kind of weird. How did he get all the way up there all of a sudden? And he's just standing beside the third egg, and then it looks like they are going to arrest the bishop to clear his name, and then all of a sudden it turns out that Hartley and Hartley and the bishop are actually together, and they've been conning Booth the entire time. So, because on the train earlier in the movie, when Booth isn't going to tell Hartley about where the location of the third egg actually is, he hangs him off the train, and yeah, it's just funny that I didn't see that coming in the very first time I watched it. Like, my face looked like what Ryan Reynolds' face looked like when he goes, "What the fuck? Like, how in the world did you guys con me that well?" So they leave him handcuffed to a tree. Agent Doss finds him, and then he actually ends up on their boat at the end of the movie after all of that happens. And I guess he had made a deal with Agent Doss, or oh my god, Inspector Doss. He had made a deal with Inspector Doss and drained the money out of all their accounts. But he also makes a deal with them that there's a bigger score for them to make, and so he makes a deal with them that unless they make this deal with him to get the bigger score after what they'd done to him, that he was just going to basically leave them to the wolves of Inspector Doss, or with Inspector Doss, yeah, kind of like leave them to the wolves sort of thing. And so they make the deal because obviously they need the money now, and so this kind of sets up for the sequel, right? So there were very subtle hints throughout the movie that I guess Hartley was not necessarily who he said he was, because in the very beginning he says, "Yes, I am the bad guy," and doesn't actually end up ever showing Booth his credentials. And then he tells him, "You have no idea what I'm capable of." And when they're in jail, I think what was it that Booth says to him in jail? And he just agrees with him. And then, yeah, like, "You have no idea what I'm capable of," sort of thing. And there was a couple other, like, subtle hints as to Hartley being a con man himself. Because he says on the train, right, to him that, I guess that was when they were in jail, because he said his father was a con man, so he became. Oh, he doesn't actually talk about his father in the prison. So yeah, he tells him on the train. His father was a con man, so he became a cop. And I guess it was like the opposite way around sort of thing for him. I guess, yeah, was Booth's dad a lawman, so he became a con? But then Booth's dad was very distant and kind of shut him out, and then he ended up losing this watch, or so he thought, and then he found it again, and it ended up being ended up being the key to unlocking the door in Argentina. It was like a Nazi watch that, like, was magnetized to the door, and it opened the door. So I guess his dad was also a historian as well, and clearly was probably pursuing the eggs anyway. And I guess Booth didn't really want anything to do with it originally, but he knew it was a big score. So, and then also the scene at the end too, where all the cops come in and arrest the royal family there that they were giving the eggs to, and Ed Sheeran was performing and tries to fight the cops. Oh my god, just what? Yeah, that scene was super comical. And then obviously Hartley and the bishop get away. And yeah, we're set up for we're set up for a sequel for sure at the very end, where they're going into like this pyramid. I don't think they give away the location of where they are. It does look familiar, but yeah, I don't think they ever give away the location of where they are. So yeah, definitely, there's definitely going to be a sequel to this movie. It's already on IMDb. It's just when it actually comes to fruition. So yeah, I gave this movie a 10 out of 10 because I really did thoroughly enjoy it, which is an awfully low, or which is a higher rating than what IMDb got, 6.3. I don't know why. I thought this movie was super enjoyable, and it definitely, the twist at the end definitely threw me for a, like, I was just like, what the hell just happened there? So yeah, 10 out of 10 for this movie, and I guess we'll see you guys in the next review. Bye bye for now.